Today, we're looking at a gray ink by Atramentis, Charles Dickens Cement Gray. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. There's timestamps down below so that if you are only interested in certain parts, you can skip around, but if you've got the time, please check out the entire video. Also, you can follow me over on Instagram, and if you like fountain pen ink reviews, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Jinhao 51A with a fine nib. I wrote with it for a day. I then used it to take the notes for this video. For the first writing sample, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. There is an additional writing sample that'll happen later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it comes in a vial something like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some decent shading throughout. Like on Atramentis, the A starts lighter, it gets darker, but on the R into AM, lighter than the letters around it. Dickens starts lighter and works its way darker. The extra fine is lighter than the stub, quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and some very nice shading. Look at how quick starts as a mid-tone, gets lighter, gets very dark at the K. The starts light and gets dark. Brown starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. 11 seconds to dry. Now the medium is about the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and some very nice shading. Brown starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. Fox starts darker, gets lighter, gets darker in a very short amount of space. The starts lighter, gets darker. Over, lighter to darker. 18 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we do get plenty of color variation in the writing. Now, Tomoe River has no bleeding and a little less Tomoe River ghosting than we're used to. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, some nice shading. Look at the LE in Charles, how dark that is. The KE in Dickens, very dark. So it's giving us darker spots within this by certain letters. The extra fine is a little lighter than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, some very nice shading. The starts light and gets dark. Quick is dark on the bottom of the Q, dark at the dot of the I, dark at the K. Otherwise a uniform tone. Brown starts very dark, becomes a uniform tone at the O all the way the rest of the way through. So we get a nice uniform gray with some very dark letters in it. 15 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine. The medium has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some very nice shading as well. Quick starts dark, goes to that mid-tone to very dark at the K. Fox is dark at the bottom of the F, lighter at the top of the F, lighter in the O, dark at the X. Super nice. 25 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation looking far left to far right, and we do get plenty of color variation in the writing. Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading in the form of certain letters being a little bit lighter. It's a much darker ink here. The A in Atramentis is a little bit lighter. The back side, the left side of the lower K is a little lighter, so there's spots. The LE in Charles, darker than the letters around it. Extra fine is lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does also offer some very nice shading. Quick starts dark, gets light, and gets dark again. Brown goes from dark to light. Fox, from light to dark on this down swoop of the F to light up into the O, dark at the X. Over goes from light to dark. 12 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine. No feather spread, halo sheen, and again, some very nice shading. Quick goes dark to light to dark. Brown is pretty uniform across and then in the end gets very dark. Nice stuff. Overs light to dark. 19 seconds to dry. Very manageable number there. The scrubby for the extra fine and the medium show plenty of color variation, and we do get it in the writing. I agree with Vita that we can learn a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this gray push its way very uniformly all the way up. Only a little bit of extra gray is gathered at the top. So I do have a feeling that this is going to be a little bit more resistant as inks go, just looking at the first one. Now, really interesting is across the top. That green is a very light green, and really that green, I haven't done this before, but that looks like Waterman's Harmonious Green. That is a very light, distinctive green there. It's quite interesting. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That gray that was slowly seeping up on the first one is holding fast in a line at the bottom. Only some light gray is pushing its way up, and that green is much more noticeable at the top of this one because so much of that gray stayed at the bottom. I'm expecting some resistance here. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Based on a chromatography, I am very surprised with what I'm seeing with the highlighter. The amount of blowout that's occurring on the lowercase h and even on the I is very surprising to me. To get some feathering that occurs with highlighting isn't the end of the world, but I wouldn't use this in a note-taking situation because of what happens with the lowercase h. Water has had very little effect on this ink. It's only moved the darkest tone away and left a majority of the ink behind. Pen Flush did much more than water did, but we are still seeing a lot of ink there. It is really not getting rid of this ink. The 1/3 bleach solution does completely remove it from the page. Should you need to use a 1/3 bleach solution, make sure you flush your pen with water immediately after so you don't rust your metal bits. For the inks I tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. I'm also linking a video that shows how I do my testing and my calculations. The Atramentis Cement Gray has a viscosity of 2.31, making this normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. The Atramentis Cement Gray has an average dry time of 17 seconds, making it not just normal, but average. Instead of finding inks that look like the Atramentis Cement Gray, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now I wanted a nice light pink, and I went with Robert Oster's Cherry Blossom. The second writing sample is done on Life, Apica CD, and Franklin Christoph paper. Here we're looking at Life paper. Very nice laid paper. Now the bleeding spot that occurred, I was scratching something out, so it went down stupid thick. Tiny spot, that's on a scrubby. So both of those, I was putting it on a bit thick, and so that's why it came through. Otherwise, it's got really no bleeding or ghosting. The 1.1, this is really interesting because just to back up and look at that, look at how green this looks. This looks very green compared to what we got from Rhodia. Sorry, just a moment there. What happens on the yellow Rhodia? Very green on the yellow Rhodia. This wasn't the planned one today. How about that? Really affected by the tone of the paper that you put it on. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is much lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some very nice shading. Like Quick starts darker, gets lighter, and gets darker again. Fox starts lighter and gets very dark at the X. The starts lighter and gets darker. 8 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, just a tad lighter than the stub, and that tad lighter does make a tremendous difference here. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, and that tad lighter allows it to shade. Look at how quick goes from lighter to darker at the K. Brown is a tad bit darker at the B, lighter into the rest of brown. So that tiny little bit made all the difference in its ability to shade. 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both do show us some color variation far left to far right. We do get it in the writing sample. Apica CD notebooks. Yeah, we're back to gray. Very interesting. Right back to gray. No bleeding, no ghosting. It's like a completely different ink. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it does offer some shading. Look at what's going on in Charles. It starts darker, starts lighter, very dark at the H, gets lighter towards the R, very dark at the L. So it does offer some nice shading with the stub. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and some very nice shading. Thus starts light and gets dark. Quick starts dark, gets light, gets dark. I think this is actually some of the nicest. Oh yeah, some of the nicest looking writing is right here with the Apica. Fox starts dark, gets light, gets dark. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine. A little bit lighter than the stub. With no feather spread, halo sheen, and some mediocre shading. Over is nice where it goes light to dark. Quick goes darker to a little bit lighter to very dark at the K. The beginning of the B in brown is lighter than the rest of the word, so there's some that's there. 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows us plenty of color variation, and we got plenty. The medium shows plenty, and we got plenty. It's just not as pronounced on the medium. And last up is Franklin Christoph paper. A little more absorbent paper, but no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 5 seconds to dry. Medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine, same tone as the stub. The medium is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine does show us some color variation, although we're not getting it. The medium shows none, and we got none, and that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Atramentis Charles Dickens Cement Gray? Gray ink is a very difficult one to get right, especially for me. I prefer my gray inks to look a lot like pencil, like a 2B on the page. Now, this is a very good gray. It is not perfect, but it is very good. It is a very nice gray on the page that gives very decent shading. I like it. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience? I found a dry fine or dry medium to really put down the right amount of ink so that you can get quite a bit of that shading and really show how nice a gray this is. If you've made it this far, and according to my analytics, 50% of you aren't, and you enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, I would invite you to subscribe, and thanks for watching.